right. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name's Jody Zarambi. Some of you might know me from my pen name, Jazzy Mitchell. I'm the moderator today, and we're going to do a session of question and answer with some of our guests. But before we do that, we're going to get to hear an excerpt from all three. So let me introduce you to who we have today. We have Heather Werner from Launch Point Press. We have Ann Tonnell from Desert Palm Press and K.L. Mitchell, also from Desert Palm Press. Thank you for being here today, ladies.
Yeah, thanks for
Really
having us.
appreciate it. Yeah. So we're going to jump right in here. All of you are going to be reading from an excerpt from one of your books. So what we'll do is I will introduce you right before you start your reading. And then I ask that before you begin reading, please tell us about the book and set up the scene for us. So we're going to jump right in there. And Ian, you're going to be up first. Go ahead and tell us what you're reading from.
Well, like I said, I'm reading from my second book, Not Sorry, and it's actually the first book of the Mountains to Coast romances. It's a story of forgiveness and growth as both characters are discovering who they are and who they can become. Monty has been recently released from an area women's prison, and the generous Liz offers the homeless Monty a place to stay in exchange for some home repairs. We'll pick up in chapter 2. While her closest friends and distant relatives still called her Beth, she lived her double life as Liz Clay. She kept a low profile and moved to a relatively underpopulated area of the state. She decided on the lottery's annuity option so as to avoid the owner's taxation. While the monthly income was not staggering, it was certainly plenty to live on and do as she wished. She was able to retire before age 40 and live on her winnings. People in the area assumed she had some family money, and she was perfectly happy to let them think that. The area was great for hiking and birding. She had even bought a folding kayak, so added that to her fitness plan. She also enjoyed fishing, both at the lake and on the coast when she visited family or friends there. She was looking at a couple of volunteering options, but she was concerned people would begin asking a lot of questions about who she was. Monty had spent the entire day under the house working on insulation and a vapor barrier. When she emerged, she was dusty, and her white protective suit was the same color as the Georgia clay upon which she was working. A respirator mask hung under her chin, and she had pulled the work goggles onto her forehead. Liz, I'm done with that project, but we need to get a few insulation bats and some new flex duct pieces. I had to clean out some sections of the insulation that had old mouse nests. They chewed holes in a few of the ducts. I can fix all that. Liz crouched down to take a look. The plastic vapor barrier was neat, and the overlapping seams were secured with tape. Very little ground showed, and that was mostly around the support pillows. Monty had also neatly stacked all of the trash in one place under the porch. Monty stepped out of the suit and placed that on the trash. She had on the same sleeveless tee, tucked into a pair of Liz's old khakis. Monty had had to cinch the belt tightly to keep the pants at her waist. Her hands were on her hips, and her left foot was about 4 inches below her right to keep her balance on the sloping ground. Liz did a double take and felt the warm stirring again. If this were a romance novel, she shook her head. Did I do something wrong? Monty asked, puzzled. Not at all. Sorry, Liz replied, and quickly attempted to cover her thought. I was just thinking about how I had already paid someone else to do what you just did. What you said about paying someone else may be true, but I'm pretty sure that's not what you were thinking, Mommy challenged. Dinner is ready, Liz said, changing the subject. She blushed and turned away. If you want to get cleaned up first, I already washed all the dishes except for what we were going to use to eat. I'm having wine. Do you drink? I will, but I don't know how I'll react. It's probably been 2 years. I mean, I'm not an alcoholic or anything. I just don't usually have any money. Or I'm in the slammer. She chuckled and frowned. You're not there now, so join me. Liz smiled to herself. At the table, Money looked down at the food. Those are those bow tie things. I saw them once in a magazine at the library. They're cute. After a bite, she raised her brows. This is really good. What's on this? She asked. She looked at Liz after she took a large bite of pasta. It's asparagus and Parmesan cheese sauce, Liz explained. I typically like one dish meals. You'll see. Call me lazy, but why not have veggies and pasta in the same dish? Lonnie nodded in agreement as she ate. The wine is very good. I didn't think I would like red wine. I'm used to pink and sweet wine, but I like this. Pinot Noir is lighter, spicy. To me, this one has a little trace taste of black cherry. Some reds are heavy. I like those too, but not with this food. Maybe with a rich red tomato sauce. Or with a steak, Monty asked. One could have a heavy red with a steak, but I don't eat any land animals. I eat fish, seafood, eggs, and milk, cheese. Other lacto-pescatarian, Liz responded. Wow, you wouldn't get on too well in jail. Monty chuckled. Probably not, Monty, Liz said. I see your dressing came off, she said, looking at Monty's head. But the strips look good. It's okay to leave it like that, like I said, until they start coming off. You'll know when they're ready. I feel my hair's growing out too. Monty rubbed her hand across the blonde stubbles. I don't look quite so much like a con now. Your hair looks good that way. It suits you, Liz said softly. She took another sip of wine. Oh, you mean con-like, Monty did. No, short hair becomes you. That's what I meant. Liz pursed her lips. Monty kept looking into Liz's eyes. Liz averted the gaze. They finished eating, and Monty cleared the table and put the dishes in the dishwasher. Liz washed the glasses by hand. Monty asked if she could call Mr. Floyd and then excused herself to make the call. Liz heard Monty explaining what she was doing and the address where she was living. She gave Liz's landline as her contact number. She said okay a few times and said goodbye. I have to report to Mr. Floyd in person on Tuesday. Is there a bus I can take to Gainesville? Otherwise, I guess I can hitch. You will not be hitching. I will drive you down there. There isn't any public transportation. It doesn't make sense to take the shuttle that takes hikers to and from the trail when I can drive you. We can go shopping while we're there. You need some clothes that fit you. Liz's reply was firm. Look, Monty said, I don't want to put you out any more than I have already. I'm pretty sure I haven't earned enough yet to buy any clothes. Don't worry about that. I wish you wouldn't, that's what I mean, Liz said. I'm sorry, I can be bossy. I should have asked if it would be okay. You know, I'm used to people telling me what to do, but I didn't take what you said that way at all, Liz, Monty explained. I took it as you're wanting to help me out, and I appreciate that. I really do. I'm a scammer. I always have been. I probably still think that way on some level at times, but I'm keeping a list of the work I'm doing, and I'm guessing the value of what you're providing me is room and board. I'm pretty far in the hole right now, is my guess. You've barely started. A full day's work today at 20 bucks an hour at least. You're looking at more than 150, Liz explained. Some of these projects will take a lot longer than a day. Damn, I've never been paid like that. I mean, I made diddly when I worked in fast food for half a second, Honey said. I may learn to like this. She smiled at Liz as she had not done before. This is nice. You are. She nodded gently, still maintaining eye contact. I have other talents if you're ever so inclined. She maintained the gaze. Liz broke the gaze and shook her head as if waking herself. She was rattled by what she was feeling and sighed deeply. Stop it, Monty. Just saying, Monty replied. She went back into the living room. If you're not watching TV tonight, I'm going to pull out my bed. I'm tired. Good night, Liz said, and shut her doors. The next morning, Monty poured some coffee and watched Liz sitting on the swing, seemingly enjoying the morning. Liz, wrapped in a blanket, drank her coffee. Her knees were bent so that her feet rested on the swing seat. A pillow leaned against the swing's arm and chains. She leaned back against the pillow. What did Liz want? Monty went right back to that. Liz had certainly had the chance to have sex, if that had been it. It didn't seem like she needed any money. Not the money would have any to give. This chick is literally paying for me to live with her and do chores, like a cowhand in a Western or something. Bonnie pictured Liz in a Western hat and boots. Hmm, that's it.
That was great introduction to these 2 characters, and I'm wondering what's the background on all of this? Obviously, there's some sexual tension there, but what's going on? So, that was a great introduction for us. Next up is going to be Heather, so I'm gonna put you on the spotlight now, and you can go ahead and set up what you're going to read for us.
All right. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to be reading from my novel Summit Shadow. And as we dive into the story, our 4 main characters are college roommates who are reuniting for a girls' trip up Mount Torquette in Alaska. And they've just started out on their climb and they begin to suspect that they are not alone on the mountain. Bryn turned on her headlamp and then started into the trees. The trail was visible, but only just. Overgrowth threatened to revert the thin strip of civilization back to wilderness, and Tana guessed that the brush was only trimmed once a year, if that. She had to admit that Kala had a point. For such an impressive peak, it was all but forgotten. Nobody wanted to climb a mountain without name recognition, and Denali stole the thunder from all of Alaska's other peaks. As they marched through the darkness, Hannah turned her gaze skyward, hoping to catch a glimpse of familiar constellations, but the clouds shrouded them in a gray haze. Even the moon struggled to penetrate the mist. Beyond the light of their headlamps, the edges of the trail were a mass of black shadows. Trees and boulders morphed into behemoth creatures of the imagination, all waiting to pounce on unsuspecting visitors. She knew it was silly to let her thoughts wander to such dark corners. She'd spent most of her youth hiking in the woods, even at nighttime. But the idea that something was lurking in the shadows was tough to shake. The cold air coursed through her lungs, a welcome distraction, and she reminded herself to focus on her breathing. Already over 10,000 feet, the difference in altitude was palpable. Her steps were heavier, her breathing more labored. A dull pounding echoed between her temples, though whether the result of altitude or too much wine was debatable. And Bryn, no doubt in an effort to prove herself, was marching along at top speed. As if reading her mind, Kala called out, "Ease up, speed demon. We've got a long way to go. Pace yourself." She turned back to Tana and shook her head. "Kids these days," she whispered. "Thank God," Misty muttered, and Tana was relieved to hear she wasn't the only one panting. "I didn't want to be the one who said it. She's so competitive, she'd never let me live it down." Their pace slowed to a steady walk, giving Tana's breathing a chance to stabilize. Her headlight followed Kala's boots as they moved confidently through the snow. Though she'd often join Misty in teasing Kala about her compulsive need to lead the team, secretly she'd always enjoyed walking behind her. There was something soothing about her steady footfalls, how she never faltered or slipped. Walking the trails, surrounded by nature, with her eyes trained on Kala's steps, had become a meditative experience, where nothing was asked of her but to continue putting one foot in front of the other. It was the one place where she didn't feel pressure to perform or pretend to be greater than she really was. Here, she could accept her own mediocrity. In the mountains, she could simply be. She lost track of how many climbs she'd completed this way, following Kala's self-assured lead to the top. Hundreds, probably, and that suited her fine. No longer listening to her own labored breathing, the sounds of the forest became more pronounced. Tree branches creaked under their own weight. Small nocturnal creatures scurried among the underbrush, making one last dash for food before the sun rose. The wind slipped through the trees, the rustling leaves whispering as they brushed against one another. Except, Hannah strained to hear over the sound of their footsteps. It wasn't the wind. Someone really was whispering. It was soft, but undeniably human. "Hold up," she said. Misty stopped short, but Bryn and Kala, oblivious, kept walking until the rope pulled taut, jerking Tana forward. "Stop," she cried, spinning in place to determine where the voice was coming from. "You guys hear that?" Misty nodded. "I heard it too, just a second ago. Someone's out there." "Someone's following us?" Bryn's voice came out higher pitched than normal. "Shh, listen," Tana said. The wind was louder now, and there was no mistaking the human voice carrying along with it. It broke in and out, indecipherable words snatched at by the breeze. "Who's there?" Calla demanded, her hands reaching for one of the dozen pockets she'd sewn onto her waist belt. She pulled out a can of mace and held it in front of her, poised and ready. A quiet descended over them, their pursuer pausing, perhaps to assess this new threat. In the sudden silence, Hannah opened her mouth to suggest they keep moving, when the air around them exploded with voices, all speaking the same unfamiliar language. Hannah gasped and swiveled on the spot, her headlamp illuminating nothing but trees and snow, her head filled with what sounded like hundreds of people, all speaking over each other, fighting to be heard. Her teammates' eyes were wide and alert, and even Calla seemed unsure of what to do, turning on the spot with her can of mace, searching for a target. "Leave us alone," Bryn screamed, but if anything, the voices grew louder, hollering back their response. "Run," Calla yelled. When Bryn refused to move, she gave her a rough shove up the trail. "Move your ass, now!" Bryn took off running, the others close behind. The screams, mournful and pleading, followed them, piercing the air and making the hairs on Tana's arms stand at attention. Their pursuers sounded close, like they could reach out a hand and drag her into the woods, never to be seen again. Unable to stop herself, she glanced back over her shoulder, peering against Misty's headlamp at the trees beyond. A tug on her foot made her gasp, and in that split second, she was sure that whatever was chasing them had finally pounced from the shadows. But as gravity pulled her to the ground, she realized that her left crampon had snagged her right pant leg, effectively tying her legs together. Her arms flailed as she toppled forward, slamming into the rocks and snow that lined the trail. "Stop!" she cried, but Bryn and Calla were singularly focused in their panic. They continued to run at top speed, pulling the rope taut so that it smacked Hannah in the face. She had a split second to register the burn it left across her cheek before she was yanked, midsection first, down the trail. She heard Misty screaming at them to stop, to no avail. Hannah slammed along the ground for a few yards before her weight forced them to a halt. Calla's face suddenly appeared in her line of sight. "Can you get up? Are you hurt?" She reached a hand under Tana's armpit and hoisted her to her feet. Her ice axe was in hand, the pick pointed toward the trail. She felt along the back of Tana's pack until her fingers clamped around the axe strapped to the side. "Here." She yanked it free and pressed it into Tana's hand. Beside them, Misty was holding her own axe aloft, ready to strike. She shot Tana a quick glance. "You okay?" Tana nodded. The pain in her face barely registered, no doubt a side effect from the adrenaline surging through her veins. Her hands trembled, the axe shivering in the glow from the headlamp. From the corner of her eye, she could make out Bryn's light farther down the trail. Scanning the ground for footprints or any sign of their pursuers, Tana was shocked to see the tree cover had been replaced by mounds of snow and craggy boulders, evidence of how far they'd managed to climb in their panic-stricken bolt for safety. Here, above the tree line, the truck was surely miles behind them. The four women stood in silence, straining to hear their pursuers, but the wind had lost all of its former touch. The voices had quieted, a thought that should have filled them with relief, but Tana couldn't help but wonder if they were waiting in the shadows, like a mountain lion going still right before it pounced. "Are they gone?" Tana whispered. Calla swept the area with her light, taking in their immediate surroundings, devoid of all traces of other people. "Think so?" Bryn's scream cut through the air, making her teammates jump in shock. They turned in unison, watching as she dropped to the ground, her headlamp sweeping over them like one final, desperate plea for rescue. Then she vanished from sight.
Holy moly. Lots of action happening there, and what a mystery. Who's hunting them? What's going on? What are all these voices? Great reading. Thank you, Heather. Kelly, we're gonna put you in the spotlight now. Go ahead and set up the scene for me.
All right. I'm going to give a little bit from my newest book. It came out in January. It's called Hell and High Water and the Burning Eye. And I'm hoping that it'll be the first book in a series. In fact, I'm already working on the second one. I've actually read from this one before. I read the opening to it a while back. So today I am going to drop you guys straight into the middle, about chapter 17 looks like. And just to set it up, Helen and her new friend Abigail who is a kind of straight-laced, well, I should say, Helen is basically a freelance adventurer and pilot and treasure hunter, and she's teamed up with Abigail, who is a straight-laced British historian, and they have been tasked with tracking down this secret that Archimedes broke up and hid centuries ago before somebody else finds it. So, coming into this excerpt, they have followed their clues to some ancient ruins. I won't reveal where they are exactly, but they've found their way to this place, and now they are going to explore. Ready? Abigail said. And now. Helen pulled the lever downward and watched as the concealed door slid open from the other side. Abigail kept an eye on her watch, counting to herself until the doors shut again. 10 seconds, she said. Plenty of time. Helen nodded as the lever clicked back into place. You know, she said, I wonder what would happen if we weighed it down, maybe hung the knapsack off of it. You think we could keep it open? I'd be more worried about breaking the mechanism myself. So it appears we have a way out, so we might as well move on to the next bit, yes? Yeah, well, about that, Helen pointed. Have you seen the next bit? Abigail turned. They were now in a semicircular chamber with 5 doorways opening into darkness. Beside each door was another geometric shape, carefully painted into the stone. Oh, she said, more geometry. Same again, I presume? Not quite. Helen played her light against each doorway. That looks like a triangle, and what have we got here? A star, a sphere, a 4-sided pyramid, and a... What's that over there? A cone. Okay, so we're not doing platonic solids anymore, I guess. Abigail tilted her head. She approached the first doorway, staring at the shape. Come and look, she said. It's not just any triangle, isn't it? See, it's a right triangle. They even marked the angle. In fact, she brought the light in close. Well, I'll be, she muttered to herself. Pythagoras. What about him? Well, you remember he had that sort of cult when he was alive, where they believed everything is a number? Well, it more or less disbanded in his death, but there's always been rumors that a small group of diehards carried on afterward and set up a few little private places here and there where they could keep spreading the word. Nobody's quite sure how many there were or what became of them. But this seems like an ideal place for one of their temples. Under a library? I dare say they would have loved that. Alan nodded. Okay, I can see old Archie being friends with people like that. Abigail barely flinched at Archie. Yes, well, in any case, I suppose this is our way forward right there. Shall we? Helen held out a hand. Just a second. I'm not sure that's right. Remember what the note says? Something about marking the way with my sign? Well, that wasn't his sign at all. Remember Herculaneum? Of course. Abigail snapped her fingers. The sphere. She scanned the room. No cylinder, not here at least, but yes, that would be him, all right. What do you say? Helen shone her light into different passages. They seemed to twist off in all directions. I think it's about as good a guess as any, she said. It's the trip back I'm worried about. Yes. Abigail smiled at the other woman. I don't suppose you have a ball of twine about your person. Not on me, no. Oh, well, so much for the classical approach. I perhaps mark something on the floor, a little arrow, perhaps. Well, said Helen, I could scratch one on the wall if that would work. She pulled out her knife, weighing it as she searched for a likely spot. Oh, do you not have a pencil? Something that wouldn't damage the sight? Well, no, but I could put it out of sight where... She flicked the light back on the doorway and stopped. Oh, what? Seems like they already thought of that. Look. On the floor, just inside the doorway, was a blue tile embedded on the floor. On it was inscribed a short bit of script. Can you read that? Abigail knelt down. Well, I'm not sure, she said, but it might be appear, to go or to leave. So an exit sign, right? Makes sense. Keeping things secret is one thing, but getting lost on the way out, not a good idea. Anyway, I'm ready when you are. Helen sheathed her knife and hauled the bag up onto her back again. Let's go. It became apparent as the 2 women worked their way through the chambers that this was less a maze than a series of small rooms, one after the other. Each one had an exit going back out, and at least 2 doorways going deeper in. Each doorway had a symbol by it, and the 2 followed the sphere and cylinders deeper into the labyrinth. It's like a tree, you know? Helen descended a short flight of steps to the next chamber. Like, there's the trunk, and it's got branches, and they all got little ridges and so on. Interesting idea. Abigail held her line up a new set of doorways. There was a sphere and a square this time. I wonder where the other ones go to. Well, best case scenario, they'd be a dead end. Now, if it were me, I'd connect them back to each other so you'd wind up going out without realizing it. Mind you, I've been on enough of these kinds of things then that I'd love them some death traps back in the old days. She showed her light down in the passage marked with a square. It veered sharply to the right after a few meters. Probably not worth the risk of finding out. True, but you know what intrigues me? What's that? Well, the first chamber, the first shape, the Pythagorean triangle. Yeah, what about it? Well, if these were actually Pythagorean holdouts, which we don't know for sure. Yes, well, which we do not know for sure, but very likely they've got their own section of the area, and I dare say the triangle points to lead to that. In the dim light, her eyes gleamed. Could be all sorts of old scrolls and things, ancient texts, who knows what we might find. Ellen chuckled. All right, I'll tell you what, let's find this mirror thing, and then if you're up for it, we can swing by on the way out and see if the triangles go anywhere. Brilliant. Abigail rubbed her hands in anticipation. Now, shall we? It was only a few minutes later that the two women emerged into a larger area. Someone had carved the far wall into a temple facade. Giant columns and bas reliefs lined the wall, each surmounted by a different geometric shape. Two enormous bronze doors, aged but still intact, opened into a further dark place. To the side of each door, a waist-high cylinder stood surmounted by a sphere. The women stood at the threshold, gazing at the impressive sight. Well, said Helen, I think we just might be in the right place. It's amazing, whispered Abigail. I've never seen anything like it. Well, grandiose, if you ask me, Helen said. I wonder if... She moved to one of the cylinders and examined it. Uh-huh. The cylinders? Relatively recent addition. Guessing they made some kind of deal with Archimedes and then went back and put his sign over what was already here before. Plausible. Abigail's flashlight traced over the ancient carved facade. I wonder what it was before. Helen grinned. Let's find out. She stepped through the darkened doorway. Inside was another vast chamber. It was rectangular with old porch sconces surrounding the perimeter. The floor was cut marble, rendered in an elaborate mosaic of repeating geometric shapes. The walls were covered in mathematical formulae, including representations of the platonic solids they had seen earlier. Helen aimed her light at the ceiling and retreated to an elaborate rendering of the night sky. Abigail stepped across the threshold and studied it with fascination. Good Lord, she whispered. It's a temple. Yes, a temple to mathematics. And not just that. Have a look. Helen pointed upwards. Abigail tilted her head back and examined the scene above. The solar system. That's right. They did dabble a bit in astronomy, didn't they? More than that. What do you see? Abigail shrugged. Seems all right. That's the sun. And yes, 5 planets. In all fairness, that's all they knew about at the time. Still, it's nice work. They even have the rings around Saturn. Look. Yeah, but look what's in the middle, though. The sun. Well, yes, I did. Oh, right. Most people didn't go in for heliocentrism in those days. I guess our old buddy Pythagoras must have worked it out. No wonder they had to go underground. Helen grinned at the other woman. Things you see when you don't have a camera, huh? Then, she traced the light around the room. There was another stone cylinder at the very front, and after that, a few steps led up to an empty base. Ellen went to examine the cylinder. It was very plain, clearly another one of the later modifications to the temple. It was about chest height to her and bare, except for a familiar rectangular hole that cut into one side. Abigail joined her. What did you find? Keyhole, I think. Ellen shrugged off her knapsack and dug out the box containing Archimedes' key. All right, she muttered. Let's see. This one's one to go in sideways, looks like. Hold the light for me, will you? Thanks. All right, so I need to move this gear back. There was a ratcheting sound as she turned a smaller crank on the end. And it should fit. Great. Now, she turned the crank and listened. Nothing. Perhaps if we move the other gear into place. Oh, good idea. Yeah, let's see. Yep. All right. And once again, she gave the handle a turn. This time it worked. Something deep within the mechanism came to life, and as they watched a portion of the dais slip aside, up from below came a stone table about the size and shape of an altar. It emerged from the darkness until its base was level with the dais.
We're going to stop right there. I'm going to stop you. I don't want you to tell them all what happens next. They have to read the book.
Right.
Great job. Do you happen to have the book nearby to show us the cover?
Okay. Well, I'm actually heading out here in a bit to a book swapping shop, so I've got most of them packed away. I do have the
There we go. So we can at least get a look at it. Thank you, Kelly.
yes.
All right. And that was a great reading. It really plops you into the middle, seeking all those mysterious hidden artifacts and to find out what's going on with that temple. I can't wait to find out what happens next. And I bet other people feel the same way. I hope anyone who's watching today that if you enjoyed the readings, you go ahead and leave a comment from wherever you're watching it, whether it be Facebook or Instagram. Let your authors know that you enjoyed these works. So while I have all three of you here, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions to get to know you a little more. The first one's going to be for all three of you. And it's just tell me, why did you start writing and how did you know you wanted to become published? So who wants to start with that?
I was driving back and forth to my mom's to help care for her for stretches of time. And the drive was 6.5 hours one way. And on the drive, I just was thinking about all these stories just kept coming and the different characters. And I ended up, uh, while she would be asleep, it was almost like, I had the book already written in my head. I'd never really even considered writing a book or anything, but these stories just kept coming. And so while mom would sleep during the day a lot, I would type and type out the stories. Sometimes she'd say, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "I think I'm writing a book." After I was finished, I mean, in about a 3-month period, I had 2 novels read. And of course, these are first drafts. Don't get me wrong, they were very rough. But I just thought, whoa, what's the use in writing these if maybe I'll just see, can I be published? I mean, it wasn't like it was on my bucket list.
And now since you've started, you can't stop. It keeps on coming.
I'm not sure about that part.
Well, here's hoping, Ann. Just
Yeah.
hoping. Heather, how about you? How is it that you got started and did you always know you want to be published?
I started out as an adventure writer. I do a lot of mountaineering, a lot of bike tours. And so I got my start writing articles about my trips for magazines, women's trail magazines, that sort of thing. And in 2017, very similar to Anne, you just have like dramatized versions of these articles you're writing, but in story form. And it just runs through your head. And you say, well, why not write it down? Why not turn it into a book? And yeah, once it's written, you have to try and query it. Otherwise, what was the point? And
Right.
I think when we all start out at that point, we're so naive. We think, oh, there's a book written, and querying, as I'm sure you guys all know, it's a
Mm.
rough gig out there. And so, yeah, I kind of dove headfirst into that and sort of figured it out on the fly. And here we are.
And here we are. And I'll tell you, querying is really rough because most don't even respond to you. And then if they respond to you and you're lucky enough to be able to submit your manuscript, you can't send it anywhere else. Most publishing houses don't allow you to do simultaneous submissions. So then you're waiting for 60 to 90 days even to know if they're interested in signing you. So it's a long process. And it's probably not going to get any easier. It's always been that way. When I first started out, I did queries too, and I got a lot of rejections. You really just have to get that thick skin and keep on moving with it. KL, go ahead and tell us, when did you start writing and how did you know you wanted to become published?
Oh gosh, I think I've pretty much always been writing, even in school. And so me and a few of my friends would write stories for each other and whatnot. And I always got good feedback and really enjoyed it anyway, watching other people read my stuff. So that has
Sure.
always been a background of my life. even as I went in different directions for my actual career. About 10 years ago, I came to Kansas City. I wound up taking some jobs writing for local publications just to keep my hand in, so to speak. And I, at the time, got to the point where I always felt that I was ready to try a novel. And after a couple of false starts, I actually got one together and prepped enough to send it out there and wanted to see if I could find somebody who thought it was worth publishing. And happily I did.
Yeah, awesome. Ian, let me give you this question. I know that this book you just read from is part of the Mountains and Coast romance series. What inspired the idea for that series? How did you come up with the theme's focus? And how much knowledge do you rely on for the readers having read a previous book within your series to understand what's going on?
Um, in the mountains, well, first of all, we have a really pretty close knit friend group. We've all been friends for 20 plus years, lots of us 30 plus years. And there's the circle that we lived on in the mountains was a small circle, but there were some people on there that had cabins. One of the reasons we bought there was some of the people we had cabins had connected. We were all connected in some way. And then even people that we didn't know when we moved on the circle were connected in some far off way, some
Yes.
really remote way to us, to somebody else we knew. So I realized, especially when you get to my age, you realize that the world is small in a lot of ways. And so I thought, why not do something that connects a bunch of people? I enjoy reading books and I've read several series where even if they don't have the exact same characters, there's some characters that you'll see that kind of connect. And I like that. They take place in a certain town. And so you get to know people. Because I was spending a lot of time at mom's and going down to the coast of North Carolina, I saw these books take place over those places. As far as the characters in the book, because I like people to show up as they have in my life, then all the books can stand alone.
Mhm.
But even the books that aren't in the series, you'll see some characters from some of those other books appear.
Oh, like guest appearances. Those are
Yeah.
fun. Thank you. And to what extent do you rely on your readers to know what happened in another book? It sounds like you don't rely on it too much.
Right, just what's necessary to so they're not just these stray characters that just emerge. There's some background enough to explain who they are.
Excellent. Thank you. Heather, how did you prepare for this book? And I know you touched on a little bit that you've used your past experiences to incorporate into these books, but how much of that do you end up explaining for the common reader when they go to read this wonderful, mysterious horror book?
So, mountaineering's been a huge part of my life since I was a kid. I started when I was 6 years old. My mom was a climber. So, there was a huge challenge in taking all that information that I've gained over a lifetime and putting it into a story and not making it sound like a textbook. I tried to give readers, obviously, a very dramatized version of what it's like to climb a mountain. In the book, pretty much everything that can go wrong on a mountain goes wrong. So they're getting
Mhm.
the extreme version of events. I want to give them that taste of mountaineering. Hopefully, it doesn't scare anyone away from climbing because it's a wonderful sport. This is a very extreme version of what could possibly happen.
I would
But
say that's true.
yeah, yeah. And I wanted to show them all the gear we use, show them how we prepare for the danger of a climb, and hopefully not make it like bogged down in all the technical details. Just give them a little taste so they can picture it, so they know what the characters are going through, but mostly focus on the story and the action and the excitement and the characters' journey with each other.
Do you have any plans to make this book one of a series? Maybe do more books where they're climbing Mount Orchid or other mountains with these characters?
So I don't want to reveal the ending, but some characters, it feels like they had their happy ending. They ride off into the sunset. I feel like they're in a good place to leave them. And some characters did not have such a happy ending. And the character that I feel like you could go far with is Bryn. She is
Mm.
the one that I relate to the most. She's a writer. She's got that golden retriever energy. She's just happy to be there and gung
Mm.
ho to do anything, no matter how dangerous. And my lovely editor, Jane, hated Bryn. When I was going through the edits, it was just comment after comment of like, oh, this person's the worst. Why would anyone climb with her? And I'm dying inside because it's me, basically.
It's you.
And, and if there was going to be a sequel, it probably would follow Bryn. So I'm sorry, Jane. But
She's the one writing the book, and that she would write the
yeah,
magazine articles. So I can see the connection there since you also write for magazines and
exactly.
adventure journal. Yeah, but I think that would be great too. And this isn't your publisher talking either. I just think it would be good. The book you just read from, you said it's going to be the first in the series. So
Yeah.
did you know that when you wrote it, or is that a decision you made afterward? And how would that change the overarching theme within the series?
Oh, yeah. I was planning on a series from the get go, actually, because I mean, I always enjoyed like the Indiana Jones series and Tomb Raider and all those kinds of things, and I thought it would be fun to have a series of adventures along those lines.
Will it include the 2 main characters in the other books too, Helen and Abigail?
Oh yes, yes, they're the
Ex
center of the series.
Right. Excellent. Let me throw another question to all of you. What themes do you like to explore in your books, or what tropes do you like to explore in your books? Ian, why don't you answer first?
A lot of my books have loss and grief in them because I think we grow through these experiences, and it's interesting to me. And tropes, I'd say there's a lot of will they, won't they kind of pull in the relationship. There's some perceived power dynamics, as like with Not Sorry, some age or stage gap,
Mm.
where people not necessarily vastly different in their ages, but definitely different in where they are in life. And one of the tropes almost always thinks that there's something a lot of people hate, and that is the last quarter breakup or some extra tension, relationship struggle in that last quarter of the book before they go on to HEA.
Yes, of course. We need HEA whenever possible. Heather, why don't you answer that for me then? What themes do you like to explore in your books, and what types of tropes?
Main theme that I often use is breaking people down mentally, physically, emotionally, and just seeing what their core is. And I think that appeals to me because I like that in real life. I like doing that to myself. I like seeing what happens to other people. Often on a mountain expedition, things go wrong. And when you're out there, you might see someone who comes off at first glance as like very soft, maybe meek. And then things go wrong and they step up and they've got this iron core that pushes them through. Or someone who's very masculine and macho, they go to pieces. And
Right.
to get rid of that facade and see what someone is really made of is just so appealing to me. And so that is a pretty common theme in my books. I want to break people down and see what's underneath.
Nice. And are there any particular tropes that you like?
I try not to use anything too often. Mostly I like action, the hero's journey, that's stereotypical, but it's going
Yeah.
to be extreme adventure, probably a little bit gory. And that's what does it for me.
All right, cool. How about you, KL? What kind of themes do you like to explore in your books, and what type of tropes?
I think my favorite kind of overall theme, so to speak, is the idea of the picaresque novel, the idea of unlikely heroes, especially the more flawed, the better, in my opinion. The Khalazad, which I put out three, are basically that whole thing. And they're really kind of, in terms of tropes, for example, in those books, I guess it would be the trope of subverting other tropes, pretty much. I love
Sure.
taking things like the Princess and the Dragon or the Chosen One and whatnot and turning them on their heads and playing with them. As for the more recent stuff, the Hell and High Water book, well, I already invoked the spirit of Indiana Jones and those similar stories. And that's really kind of where these books are going. Ancient ruins, long
Right.
hidden secret, death traps, fantastic gadgets.
Hmm.
I've kind of been holding off on supernatural stuff, but I think I might start incorporating it
Oh, fun.
to build up the story. Yeah.
Nice. And now that you've had several books published, what have you learned that you wish you knew while preparing your first book to be published?
The importance for me of an editor before the manuscript ever goes to the publisher.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. That's a good
so
one.
I always, I mean, I thought in the beginning, well, I had a journalism minor and I'd done that kind of news writing, but I thought I'd be safe. Well, I was very wrong. So I would just urge anybody who's unpublished or self-published that they get a really good editor, a professional editor. My first one is a PhD student at the creative writing here at the university. And so somebody who knows what they're doing to reach.
That's really great advice, actually, because I can't tell you how many manuscripts I get that are a mess when they come in, and they're supposed to be the best representation of that story. But a lot of people don't understand. Heather, how about you? What is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you were preparing your first book for submission, if
Oh
anything?
gosh. Just that it's a long process. When you first start out, you don't know what you don't know. And you think, all right, well, I've got this manuscript. I'm going to waltz in. And similar
Mhm,
to Anne, I already had a writing background. It's going to be easy
mhm.
breezy. And the query process and the edits that follow, all of that takes longer than it takes to actually write the book in the first place. It goes on
Yep,
forever. There's rejection, there's heartache. And if you,
yep.
I would tell younger Heather, like, it's not going to be a cakewalk. You need to prepare for a long haul.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking with that is films, TV series, all of that. It takes them a long time to get to the part where they're actually filming, and then even longer for them to produce it in order for it to be seen by anyone. And a lot of people just don't understand the background of it and what's happening and all the people involved. So that's great advice, Heather. And Kelly, how about you? Is there anything that you've learned since preparing your first book that you wish you had known?
Honestly, I would echo Heather in just how much of a long, drawn out process it is. Especially, I mean, we already mentioned about the no concurrent submissions rule that most of these places have, and the fact that
Mhm.
they don't even bother to send you a rejection and they'll just ghost you.
Yeah.
So between those two things, it really is just a particularly long and frustrating wait.
And that's a good point. I can tell you as a publisher, I always respond, even if there's no way on earth I'm actually going to read that manuscript. I will say thank you, but it doesn't look like it's going to fit with our publishing house.
See,
But
there, that's yeah.
so at least I respond. If I respond to someone that I might be interested in, but there are ways off before I can go into contract, then a lot of times I'll give them a type of analysis and just say, broad strokes. You need to look at your point of view. You need to look at your verb tense, things like that, and then resubmit if you want to. But I can tell you, when I was doing all this as a writer, I didn't get a lot of responses either. They, as you said, they ghost, they didn't respond. And part of that is I get several manuscripts every single week. I mean, I'm just inundated with them. And it's true for most of these smaller publishing houses. We just have so many coming through that you don't always have time to respond, but I try to be polite and at least say something. So
Yeah,
I
I
get
mean,
that.
even just taking 30 seconds to send out a form rejection, you know.
Right. At least you know they got it and that sort of thing.
Right.
And just circling back to what Ann said, one of the biggest things is you need to send out your manuscript to be looked at before you submit. And it has to be someone that isn't your friend or family member.
Yeah.
You really need that impartial, constructive criticism and not just someone saying, oh, it's awesome. You're awesome. And it's going to be a bestseller. You really need to know if there's anything that needs to be worked on beforehand. It looks like we are pretty much out of time. So I want to go ahead and I'm going to ask one more question. Give us a little information on what you're working on at the moment. Kelly, you want to start us off on that?
Okay. Right now, the thing I'm actively writing is a second Hell and High Water book. This one takes place mostly in Africa so far, basically tracing the steps of a particular Chinese explorer named Zhang He, who was an actual historical figure. And it's the usual mix of actual history and made up stuff. So it should be pretty good fun.
Looking forward to it. And how about you?
I'm not actively working on anything right now. As I've said before to many people, I still have this idea that I'm going to write a YA book. If it gets written, or a story, maybe it'll end up just being a story, but
Mhm.
it'll, it's, will be the main character will be 14, 15, 16-year-old who is mentioned in my last Big Cross Dead.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Hope to see that. How about you, Heather?
Well, for me, Summit Shadow just came out. So now we're dealing
Mhm.
with promo for Summit Shadow and getting it into
Mhm.
bookstores and doing author events. So as far as writing goes, this is like the calm time for writing and the busy time for promoing. But
Mhm.
what I am noodling with is a book about Bryn from Summit Shadow and seeing if we can keep her story going, because I think there's a lot more to tell with her as she starts her adventure author journey.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, Bryn seemed like a one-dimensional character, and then as you go through the book, you start to learn more and more about her, and she's not so simplistic, and there's a reason why she acts the way she acts. I could see
Mm.
a book that could be really, really interesting, and you could go a long way with her. So great. Well, I want to thank you, ladies, for being here today. For those watching, I hope that you'll take a look at their books. You can go over to desertpalmpress.com or over to launchpointpress.com. You can also find them at all the usual outlets. So please support your lesbian authors and feel free to comment to let them know that you loved this session today. Thank you all for being here, and I hope we'll see you again soon.